game, again, as Mary said earlier, you have, there are 3 rounds at the tournament. Each round is scored separately, so you may do poorly in the first or second round, or do great, and then come back in the 3rd round and score the whole board and do great, and that will all count. Your best round is the one that counts. There's a total of 400 possible points that you can get. Your robot starts in base, and your robot has to be completely in that rectangular section when it starts. There is also an invisible 16-inch height ceiling on that base. Think of it as a box, and your robot has to stay within that, and anything attached to your robot has to start within the base and within that 16-inch height ceiling. So the first thing that we have to do is, and again, it's not in any order. You can try any mission, any order you want, as many times as you want within that 2.5 minutes, and the game is scored at the end of the match. So it's at the very end of the match that the referee scores. So you may see your team do something that will score points, but maybe later on in the same match they do something that undoes the points. It doesn't count that they got it first, because the match is scored at the end of the round, and so that's when the referee is going to score everything. Okay, so the first thing is to gain access to places, and there's a lot of choices that the teams have to make this year. It's not just go here, do that, do this. You get to pick, and you need to pick on what maybe your team is able to do, or maybe something is worth a few more points. So the first thing that we can do to gain access to places is required at the end of the match. If at the end of the match your robot is sitting in the target area, so any part of the robot touching the target area, the whole thing doesn't have to be in there, just a little part of it touching the wheels, touching the target area, is worth 25 points. Another place that you could choose to go at the end of the match is on top of the bridge. But if you go on top of the bridge, that's only worth 20 points. And on the bridge means that nothing is touching the mat, so no part of your robot is touching the mat. It could be hanging off the bridge. As long as it's not touching the mat, it's okay. And then the final place that the robot could be would be to share, vehicle sharing. If any part of your robot is touching the red of the bridge, that's worth 25 points. So 25 points in the target area, or if it's touching the red of the bridge, and another, and 20 points. It's not an additional 20 points. If you're just touching yellow, it's 20. If a little bit is touching red, it's 25. And there's another board that will be across where all those guys are sitting. There will be an identical board that another team will be competing on at the same time you're competing. So you have to be careful if you're going to share the red. Make sure you don't get pushed off by the other team. Okay, the next thing besides the getting to the bridge or to the target spot is to get access to things. And one of the things, or actually 4 of the things, are those access markers. They're the black with the green tops on them. And they're all in the up position, and they can easily be put in the down position by bumping the sides. So for each one of those markers that's bumped and put down, it's worth 25 points. So you can score up to 100 points on markers. You can see them. There's 2 right there where Harry is, and 2 up against the wall. They're in little tough places to get to, but those are the access markers, and as long as they're in the down position, they're worth 25 points. The next thing are the loops, and there's a ton of loops all over the board. There's gray ones and red ones, brown ones. I think there's an orange and a green and a yellow one, and they're all over the board. Some of them, there's a blue one too. Some of them are on the mat. Some of them are up high, like the ones in front here that are on the wall. There's one over there that's on top of the red wall, and there's some hidden in corners around here. Each of those back at base is worth 10 points each. So those have to be brought back to base. Now, there are some special rules here. Because of new technologies, sometimes new technology comes in and it makes some jobs easier. So they've put some of those rules in here. For example, if you get all 3 gray loops back in base with your robot, if your robot can bring all 3 gray loops back to base, then you can by hand take 1 red loop, anyone you want, and bring that back to base. That's one of the only hand missions that you can do. Another hand mission you can do is if all 3 red loops are in base, then you can pick any color loop that you want and bring that back to base by hand also. So all those things you can do. Make sure if you decide, if your team is one that can get the red loops and the gray loops, make sure you by hand pick that other loop up before the 2.5 minutes are over. Because if you don't get that and the time runs out, then you lose out on those extra points. So those are worth 10 points each. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is avoid impacts, and we have some warning beacons, and those are the, those are the sensor walls. The warning beacons are the little, you see they look like little red light, yellow light, green light right there? Yep, those little black towers that have the red, yellow, and green. So they're also all over the board. And the required position for these is that they have to be on the mat in their standing position. And in their standing position on the mat, they're worth 10 points each. So what does that mean at the start of the match? Anyone know? If you what? If you move them, well, you don't get more points for moving them. You can move them, but if I sat in the base and didn't do anything, would I have points to start the match? Yes, I would. I actually have, what are there, 8 of them out there? I think there's 8 of them out there. So when you start the match, you actually have 80 points before you even start. So those are in addition to being out there and having to stay up there, they're easy to knock over. So if you knock them over, you lose the points. They are also our bonus points. Your robot, once it's out of base, cannot be touched. If you have to touch it because it went off track, or you need to bring it back, or you use that as a strategy, then you will lose a warning beacon. The referee will take a warning beacon off your field. It will never go to, you will never have negative points. That's why we start off with the 80 points. And if they take it away, you might lose 10 or 20 points. That's okay. If you knock them over, you might lose some points. That's okay. You won't go into negative numbers. So those are the warning beacons, and they have to be standing up. They do not have to remain on their little spots. Like, they can be moved as long as they're all still standing up. Then they'll count 10 points each. Okay, then we have the sensor walls, and those are those red walls with the black in the middle. And we have 2 things that we can do with this. The first thing is, at the end of the match, all the sensor walls are upright. Actually, I think we need to have 4. At the end of the match, 4 sensor walls have to be upright, and they can count 10 points each for a maximum of 40 points. However, if you have the walls standing, because they're all standing already, so if you didn't knock any of them down, they're worth 40 points. But then you can say, well, I'm just going to sit in base and not do anything. They're up. I'm going to get the 40 points. It doesn't work like that. For every sensor wall that's up, you also have to have an access marker down. So if you have 4 sensor walls up, but only 2 access markers down, you only get points for 2 walls. So that's the first thing. So that's avoiding the walls. That's avoiding impact. Now, some of you may say, you know, I just don't like the idea of leaving things standing. I like to knock things over, right? I mean, how many people like to knock things over? Yes, me too. So if you decide that I'm not going to go with the with the keeping the walls standing, then you can go to plan B, which is knock all the walls down. And if you do that, then you will get 40 points, but you have to knock them all down. You can't just knock 1 or 2 down. They all have to come down. So that's worth 40 points as well. Okay, now moving over, we have the vehicle impact test, which is over here, the red truck. And basically what has to happen here is the red truck no longer, there's a little, can you lift that up for a second? See the little red stopper right there? Your vehicle no longer has to be touching that. So that can be triggered any number of ways. The most popular way will probably be to lower that little thing, and then you just let the truck go. So as long as that's lowered and it's no longer touching, it might do that, it might crash into your wall. But if that happens, that's okay. You want to get it off of that red stopper. As long as it's not touching there, that's worth 20 points. Okay, 2 more missions on here. One of them is the single passenger restraint, and that's our crash test dummy. See the little crash test dummy? That little guy has got to stay on your robot for the entire 2.5 minutes. If at any point that little guy comes off your robot, then you do not get credit for him. The referee will take him off the field. If he stays on your robot for the entire 2.5 minutes, you will get 15 points. And the final mission, there are 4 little guys in base, 4 little Lego people, and you will have to create your own transportation device. It can be like a cart that you push out. It can be with wheels, without wheels. It can be something that you lift and drop over there. But if all 4 of those people in their little transportation device are on the target area, or in the round target area, then they're worth 10 points. There you go.